Some Harvard students are calling for the resignation of President Claudine Gay. Two students called for the university president to resign in a recent op-ed in the Harvard Crimson, the school paper. Now, Gay has faced increasing calls and pressure over these plagiarism allegations, as well as criticism of her response to anti-Semitism on campus. The op-ed in the Harvard Crimson wrote, University President Claudine Gay should resign. President Gay may be a good person. She may even be a praiseworthy scholar, despite these allegations, but that isn't enough. To remain president, the leader of the world's foremost university must be held to a higher standard, one that Gay has unfortunately failed to meet. Reporter at the Free Beacon, Aaron Sabarium, wrote on X, Harvard President Claudine Gay hit with 6 additional allegations of plagiarism tonight in a complaint filed with the university, pushing the total number of allegations near 50. These are some of the most extreme and clear-cut examples yet. So there has been some movement on this since last we discussed it. More allegations coming out from this reporter, Aaron Sabarium, who's been doing a lot of work on this, and some breaking of ranks, I suppose. So these couple students writing an op-ed in the Crimson saying that she should resign. And then also this, to my mind, pretty persuasive, anonymously authored op-ed, an additional one from someone who purports to be a member of Harvard College's Honor Council and helps decide these cases, and saying if this was a student, they would certainly be sanctioned for probation, which would be a very weighty consequence according to this person.
Well, that's actually
you
not
might
what
tell
that,
me differently.
That's actually not what that article says. In that piece, which is arguing in favor of dismissing Gay, he acknowledges that only 16% of students who are ad boarded, is what we call it, taken before this administrative council, are required to withdraw. The overwhelming majority are not forced out of school or required to take any time off whatsoever.
They're put on probation.
Right. I had a friend in college who was ad boarded over thesis plagiarism issues, graduated on time. It was a first-time offense, so there wasn't any kind of like substantive consequences for him. So it is really interesting to me that there are people calling for firing, even as they themselves cite evidence that they're calling for a much more significant consequence for Claudine Gay than even that which is applied to most students in this sort of a situation.
Well, okay, if you're just quibbling with the firing part, that's fine. And I've actually not called on her to be fired. I've just said she should be held to whatever standards the students are held to. And what this person says is a first-time offense would result in probation, which would result in you'd be no longer in good standing. You'd be disqualified, again, if you were a student, from opportunities like fellowships and study abroad. And you have to be in good standing to receive a degree. This person suggests that the number of times Claudine Gay has violated this policy takes her out of that range. I also read the editorial by the Harvard Crimson from the paper itself. So they do not call on her to resign. They're standing by her. They do say that they are very dissatisfied with how Harvard has handled this. They say that threatening to sue the reporters who brought it up is a very bad look. They say that the investigation has not been transparent enough. And so even in they're kind of sticking by her, and they make several of the points you have raised about how their dislike of the allegedly bad faithness of the people bringing up these complaints should be somehow disqualifying, which I don't, of them itself, which I don't obviously agree with. But I don't know. I think, and there was also reporting that academics at Harvard privately, they're afraid to speak out. So take that for what it's worth.
It's interesting.
But I think it should raise more serious questions.
Obviously, many Harvard faculty members very publicly on the record have supported her. The main editorial from the Harvard Crimson is in support of her staying in her position, which the board already decided weeks ago was going to happen, although we continue this media cycle, I guess because what goes on administratively at the most elite university in the world is of prime importance. You don't like talking about this aspect of it, but it seems obvious that the only reason we're having this conversation is because Christopher Rufo has explicitly made this a agenda. He has an agenda to press the idea that there should not be basically any pro-Palestinian advocacy on these campuses. And anybody who defends people's free speech rights to advocate for Palestine on college campuses is characterized as anti-Semitic, as we heard in our conversation with Alan Dershowitz just a couple of weeks ago. So I don't think you can ignore that, the background of it. And I think a good way, I've said this before, to get around the perhaps legitimate interest in academic integrity while also not participating in an attack on the free speech rights of students by proxy through Claudine Gay would be to actually do a holistic examination of all of these theses and and any other allegations of plagiarism that have come up, including directed toward Alan Dershowitz, and make sure that there's a consistency in the approach. That way, you can't argue, right? If you were to do that, you could not argue that this was politically motivated in the least, because you'd be treating everybody the exact same way, and then the chips can fall where they are.
You talk about Claudine Gay as if she's some hero for free speech here. I mean, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Expression ranks Harvard last or second last in terms of free speech rights. Maybe getting rid of her and picking someone who actually would foster a free speech culture on campus would be the best thing for Harvard.
Do you know how long Claudine Gay has been president of Harvard?
A couple years, I don't know.
I think it's been about a year. The idea that Claudine Gay, in her year at the oldest university in America, founded in 1636, is responsible for whatever that organization has determined about its free speech on campus, and that firing her would cause some kind of sea change is silly. So whatever criticism,
responsibility, she's the top person in the job.
Claudine Gay is not.
And they do a yearly ranking. They move it up.
Let me ask you: do you think that Claudine Gay is being attacked by Christopher Rufo because she's being too restrictive of free speech on campus? What is the evidence that Claudine Gay has been restricting free speech or an advocate for limiting speech on campus?
I see a figure who has very credible academic misconduct accusations against her, whose tenure has not been marked by some dramatic improvement on the free speech landscape on the university, and then I conclude, regardless of the reasons for people coming after her, why is this person worth retaining in this position?
That wasn't
I just have to rally around her because conservatives don't like her?
That wasn't my question, Robby. My question was, do you think that the attack on Claudine Gay from Christopher Rufo and conservatives is because she is being too limiting of free speech in this moment where the overwhelming majority of Harvard students are protesting an advocacy for Palestinians and for a ceasefire?
Christopher Rufo is pretty, maybe we'll try to get him on the show. He's pretty forthright on what his agenda is. He wants to delegitimize diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in higher education, and I'm sure he would, I don't think he would view himself as trying to limit pro-Palestinian speech, but you probably would, and I'll let him speak for himself.
How about we speak to the issue, which is Israel-Palestine, and what Christopher Rufo's stated agenda is on Israel-Palestine.
But that is not the issue she's being investigated for by Harvard.
But Christopher Rufo has a stated agenda of saying we need to get these professors out who are defending pro-Palestinian students at these schools. That is his stated agenda. He said 1 down, 3 to go after one president had to step down. 1 down, 2 to go, or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. When he has a stated agenda that he is for suppressing the speech of pro-Palestinian protesters, to sit here and argue, Robby, that it would be an advance of free speech interests at Harvard to succumb to that pogrom that he has against her, to me seems obviously backward.
The administrators are the censors. The administrators are the ones who are violating the free speech.
Who is Roxanne Gay? Sorry, who is Claudine Gay censoring? Who is she censoring? What is the censorship here that is going to be alleviated when Claudine Gay is no longer president of Harvard?
We can go through Fired's records, but there are a number of cases that have led them to conclude that it is the most hostile campus of the 250 they rank for free expression.
And yet you can't give me any evidence of it, and yet we're going to
you do that, and then I'll do a radar tomorrow with 100 examples
Robby, we're tiptoeing around. The biggest issue in the country is that Israel is firebombing Gaza. The protests at the colleges are students saying we don't want our university to be participating in this. We want to divest from Israeli companies, and we want to put pressure on our government to stop the siege of Gaza.
That's fine. They can do that.
And in the wake of that, Christopher Rufo and a bunch of conservatives like Elise Stefanik, along with a lot of liberals in Congress, have passed a resolution equating advocacy for Palestine with anti-Semitism, have equated anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism.
And my favorite Republicans have voted against that. That's not what we're talking about with we're talking about.
And Christopher Rufo and Elise Stefanik not only cheered that on, but then participated in this hearing. Again, a private university's choice to keep whoever they want. They can hire a dog in a suit to be president of Harvard, and that is their prerogative as a private university, something that you as a libertarian purport to want to protect.
Okay, that's fine. No more federal funding, no more federal subsidy.
Do what you want to do, and I hope that
Michelle.
And I hope that. Was it Michelle Bachmann, who is a dean at a different university, who openly called for the mass killing and genocide of Palestinians, would also come under that scrutiny. But guess what? She's not. Because the people who are pursuing this agenda want to shut down pro-Palestinian speech and advocacy.
And the people defending her are overlooking serious issues
Robby,
of credibility that need to be investigated more to a greater satisfaction, even according to Harvard Crimson, which is defending her, saying this has not been adequate.
I'll say it for the second time today and probably the 15th time overall.
Right. Once we haul Dershowitz before a committee, we're allowed to
not
look
just
at Claudine
Dershowitz,
Gay.
because that would be politically motivated as well. It should be every single professor. If you're actually interested in academic integrity, then you should go back and do this kind of review.
What do you mean actually? Why wouldn't I be interested in academic integrity?
Because nobody is interested in investigating the academic integrity of any other university president.
That's not true.
Because or any other faculty member, because those faculty members haven't become figureheads for protecting the interests of Palestinian rights.
Routinely exposes conservative political figures for plagiarism or for that kind of thing in their books. That is a common thing that the media does, and it's fine, and it's never been.
We're talking past each other. That is politically motivated. My argument,
but it's fine if it's legitimate.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that in this instance, and in those instances, I think it would be perfectly fair to say, in lieu of accusations that this is politically motivated and not substantive, and to get people to invest sincerely in what I think is an important issue in investigating the integrity of academics at an institution like Harvard, which I don't know why anybody listening to this would care. There are literally over 20,000 people who have been killed in Gaza. Last Friday, Joe Biden went around Congress to issue more weapons to continue the destruction. Over 10,000 children have been killed in Gaza.
We've talked about that today.
And the whole point of this is to take the conversation around that. The Palestinian students who were shot, one paralyzed because of wearing a Palestinian scarf.
And jail for life, the people who did that. And also, we have a plagiarism investigation. They're just different issues.
I'm inviting the viewership to look at the weight and significance of these issues, ask themselves if their lives are changed at all by what goes on in an elite institution that only admits 1,600 students or so every single year, and ask themselves if their speech interests and their substantive interests are advanced by a world where wealthy, backed Zionists can force college university presidents out of their positions for not having the kind of speech that they think should be lifted up or suppressed at a university.
I mean, we disagree on the political. I mean, I agree that it's politically motivated, but keeping her as politically motivated is part of a political agenda. Everything is politically motivated. So thus we are forced to. So that's all mutually disqualifying, and then we're forced to judge the actual accusations for themselves. I think that is what should be done in this case, and I don't think it's worth overlooking the serious accusations, given that Harvard is not some bastion of free speech anyway.
I don't understand why you are so resistant to actually. I do care about academic integrity at Harvard as the person, I'm sorry, who is the only one who Harvard's academic integrity reflects on this panel. So I'm happy for them to do a broader review. Because frankly, if I'm going to really say what my honest feelings are, I think that this kind of thing is actually extremely common, that it's used, it's applied very selectively in a way that ruins a lot of people's academic careers when it's not substantive plagiarism. The issue with Dershowitz's plagiarism that was pointed out by Norm Finkelstein was that he actually misrepresented the factual record in his book in a way that made an inaccurate case for why the occupation of Gaza was legitimate. Mm-hmm. That, I think, is much more substantive and a problem when you're changing numbers of how many people were killed in a Nakba or things like that. That, I think, it really undermines the scholarship. Making these kinds of, not changing the words enough as you attribute a quote, as you like reframe, rejigger a quote in your own thing that you actually cite to, I think that you've agreed with it. That is a much less significant kind of plagiarism. Now, it's not that it's right. We all know what the academic obligations are for us in those situations to reword things so that it's not in fact plagiarism, and you should be accountable for that. But I actually think it would be very, very useful in the age of ChatGPT and this kind of analytical software to go back and see how often this thing sort of occurs and try to figure out what our academic standards should be going forward, given that incredibly common, and we're having different standards now for what it means to write a paper, whether or not we're going to still be required to do essays now that we have all of this technology to assist us, what we really want the focus of college to be. When I was in college in the early internet age, there was a lot of discussion about how much emphasis was going to be put on rote memorization, which used to be all of college, and the Harvard man, you sit there and you just memorize the Latin greats or whatever. But in the age of the internet, there's a shift to applied thinking as opposed to rote memorization, with the understanding that you can Google any fact off the internet, and do I really have to remember that this painting was painted in 1805? Sorry, I was an art history minor. And I think it's worth having a conversation based on the facts of people's behavior in the past that we can now really easily get to with ChatGPT, whether or not we should make some reforms going forward. Now, if they do this, and Claudine Gay is the only one who has ever plagiarized in the history of Harvard, well, then maybe she deserves to have distinct criticism directed toward her. But I actually think there's a meaningful conversation to be here about pedagogy that extends far beyond this. And I sincerely, not just to score points in an argument, sincerely think it would be useful and good to do a more fulsome investigation here.
That's fine. We investigate whoever you want. I mean, they did investigate Alan Dershowitz, and he was. I did a cursory Googling of this, as you keep bringing up. He was cleared
by an academic board, and everyone let it go, and he got to have a great career. So Claudine Gay was also cleared.
She was cleared by Harvard Court.
Okay, she was cleared.
Well, okay, but even the Harvard Crimson has a problem with the way this matter was handled.
Well, no, Harvard Crimson voted to say that she doesn't need to be, or wrote to say that she should not be fired. Well,
I certainly don't think she should be fired without the outcome of some legitimate investigation.
All right. Well, they don't think she should be fired. So I want to be really clear that this whole segment is based on 2 Harvard students who wrote an op-ed dissenting from the editorial board, the Harvard Crimson editorial board, which argued that she should not be fired.
And an additional opinion piece by someone who does reviews for the academic integrity and the fact that there are 6 new plagiarism accusations against her.
The basis of this, when we read it up top, we started by saying Harvard students are calling for the resignation, and then we followed up by saying 2 students called for the university president's resignation, and then
what are you saying? There were updates to this story to weigh in on, given that there were 3 articles about this in the Harvard Crimson. They're the 3 most well-read at the moment, and there are new plagiarism accusations. So it was worth discussing again.
You just said the Harvard Crimson said, and that dramatically misrepresents what the bulk of the students who write and contribute to the Harvard Crimson believe. The bulk of the editorial board wrote that she should not be fired. 2 people, with all due respect, that's their right to do so, wrote a dissenting opinion. And there was a 3rd anonymous op-ed that was written that we've also referenced today, in which even they acknowledge that only 16% of people who are ad boarded actually are suspended in any way.
Okay, but that's a little that's a little evasive, because they say that for a first-time offense, not 16%, but a larger percentage of people would be put on probation, which is a penalty, and that what she has done is beyond that.
I agree. Claudine Gay should not be allowed to do a foreign what do you call it? Study abroad.
Okay.
Preclude her from doing any study abroad trips for the next 10 years.
More Rising right after this.